We all know Squid Game. They called it entertainment. But inside its walls, it looked more like a game of survival, as hundreds of desperate people in green tracksuits were thrown into a twisted contest where the losers died and the winners walked away with a mountain of cash. But what if I told you there was a story that most of the world doesn't know? A story that wasn't fiction at all. Because decades before Squid Game ever existed, in the heart of South Korea, thousands of men, women, and children were trapped in a place where survival was the only prize, and death was an everyday reality. That place was called Brothers' Home. Between 1975 and 1987, an estimated 40,000 people were locked inside Brothers' Home in Busan, South Korea. Over 3,000 detainees filled the facility, and at least 657 deaths have been documented, though survivors insist the true number is much higher. And the man who ran it, Park Gi-hun, a former military officer turned Christian social worker, who turned government subsidies into a personal empire. For every body that entered his gates, he received money. The more people his enforcers dragged in, the richer he became. Survivors call it hell in tracksuits. This is not a tale about television series. It's about real children forced into a struggle where the only rule was obey or die. Don't take my word for it. Listen to the people who lived through it. So what was it really like to live inside Brothers' Home? I was 8 years old when my life ended, or at least that's how it felt, because that's when they came for me. I still remember that day clearly, though sometimes I wish I didn't. My sister and I were on the street, waiting for our father. We were lost, confused, but clearly not afraid. He had gone to speak to a police officer because we believed the police were there to help. We believed in safety. We believed in adults. But that day, safety betrayed us. A truck pulled up, and everything changed. I can still hear the crunch of gravel under the tires, the slam of doors, and the heavy boots on the ground. Those men came straight for us. My sister screamed and struggled, her voice carrying down the street. I fought too, kicking and twisting. But it didn't matter. They lifted us easily and threw us into the back of the truck, as if we were nothing more than cargo. And that was the last moment I saw the open city. The next time the doors opened, we were inside that hell. Brothers' Home. The gates of Brothers' Home rose above us, higher than anything I had ever seen. Maybe to a child they looked endless, like they could swallow the sky. Behind them, rows of children in green tracksuits stood like shadows. They didn't look curious or welcoming. They just looked emptied out, as if whatever made them themselves had already been taken away. Inside, names no longer mattered. My sister was no longer my sister. I was no longer Han Jong-sun. We became numbers, bodies to be counted. Park In-gon, the man who ran this place, had figured out a way to turn people into money. And the guards made sure we understood that. The rules were simple: obey or suffer. And from that day onwards, every morning started in darkness. Long before the sun rose, the guards blew whistles that cut through our dreams like knives. We lined up in silence, shivering in thin uniforms no matter the weather. Food was thrown into bowls like animal feed, watery soup, a handful of rice, sometimes nothing at all. Hunger was constant, gnawing at our ribs, whispering in our ears. And then came the labor, brick-making, sewing, hauling heavy loads we were too small to carry. I started to feel like there was no going back. The work never ended. Our hands bled, our backs ached, our legs buckled, but there was no stopping. If you slowed down, you were hit. If you collapsed, you were dragged away. Sometimes they came back, sometimes they didn't. And the guards didn't need to shout to keep us in line. Their club spoke clearly enough. But still, the cruelest punishment wasn't the beatings. It was the silence. You couldn't cry. You couldn't ask for your parents. You couldn't even whisper your own name. And the moment you showed weakness, the guards took action. The moment you showed defiance, they made an example of you. After a while, we all learned to bury our emotions deep inside. We became quiet. We became shadows. That was survival. To avoid notice, to fade into the background, to become invisible. But my sister, she was my everything, and she was different. To be clearer, she was braver than me. At night, when the guards weren't watching, she would squeeze my hand and whisper that we would escape, that one day we would see our parents again, and that this place couldn't hold us forever. Her voice was the only light I had. I clung to that hope, even as the days turned into months, and the months into years. And then one night, she tried. That day was the worst day of my life. The alarm still rings in my ears when I close my eyes. The shouting, the running, the dogs barking in the distance. I remember pressing my hands to my ears, praying it wasn't her, praying she had made it. But deep down, I knew. I never saw her again. The guilt has followed me every day since. If I had gone with her, maybe she wouldn't have been alone. Maybe she would have stood a chance. But I was too scared. I stayed. I obeyed. I survived. And that survival felt like betrayal. I grew older inside those walls, but I never grew free. Even after I was released, Brother's home never let me go. The hunger followed me. The silence followed me. The walls followed me. I still wake up at night, expecting to hear the whistle, expecting to be dragged back into line. People ask me how I lived through it. But the truth is, I didn't live. I endured. Like thousands of others, I learned to shrink myself down, to hide my humanity, so no one could take it from me. And that's why when I saw the Squid Game, I couldn't laugh or cheer like everyone else. I couldn't see it as entertainment. I saw myself. I saw my sister. I saw children in tracksuits, forced to play a game no child should ever play. Except in our version, there was no prize money. There was no winner. Only survivors, broken and scarred. My name is Han Jong-sun. I was 8 years old when I was taken to Brother's home. And even now, decades later, I'm still trying to escape. If these harrowing stories from Brother's home have captured your attention, you're not alone. Many listen, many like, but only a few take the next step. So subscribe now to fully explore the truths behind the gates and stay connected to every survivor's story. I was 13 years old when it happened. Just 13. Old enough to understand the world. Smart enough to know right from wrong. But none of that mattered the day I was taken. I was on my way home from school, the bag on my back, heavy with the day's lessons. And that's when the police officer stopped me. Simple enough, I thought. A routine check, maybe. But the way he looked at me, cold, calculating, made my stomach twist. He asked, pointing to the half loaf tucked in my bag. It was my leftovers from lunch. "Where's this bread from?" I froze, then I stammered, I got it from school." He laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. "School, huh? Liar." Then he brought out a lighter. I don't even remember screaming. The fire touched me, burning, leaving marks not just on my skin, but on my soul. He beat me until I admitted to stealing what I hadn't taken. Just to make him stop, I lied. I stole it. Please. Please let me go. And that's when he stopped. And then just 10 minutes later, a freezer truck arrived. I was pushed inside. Cold metal pressed against me, the air thick with the smell of sweat, and something dead. At that moment, I understood. My life as I had known. It was over. The truck took me to jung-jae, a place the world called a welfare facility, but there was nothing kind or caring inside those walls. No food, no comfort, no mercy. Only the rhythm of fear and pain. I was assigned to a platoon. At first, I thought maybe this is a place for people to work. But the system was perverse. Older inmates, given authority, ruled over us with brutality sanctioned by the staff. They were allowed, even encouraged, to hurt us. I learned fast. Defiance meant death. Silence meant survival. The first night, I was forced to sleep naked on the cold floor. A platoon leader poured buckets of freezing water over me. Later, he returned. I can't even say what he did without feeling the same terror I felt then. For 3 nights, the abuse continued. Each morning, I woke up trembling, praying it would end, praying I wouldn't exist in the same body the next day. Even the food was scarce and rotten, barely enough to survive. We slept 4 to a bed, tangled like animals, lice crawling through our hair, skin raw from hunger and bruises. Every corner of the dormitory held nightmares, whispers of rape, screams of beaten boys and girls, and death was always near. I saw a man in a white robe dragging an inmate across the floor, blood trailing behind him. His eyes rolled back. He didn't resist. He didn't scream. A few days later, one of our own, a boy brave enough to question the platoon leader, was rolled into a blanket and beaten until he vanished. We knew he didn't survive. Families tried to find us. My father filed reports. My brother was taken too. But the police ignored every request. The world outside pretended we didn't exist. Inside, we learned to disappear, to become shadows, to survive another day. I worked like a machine, folding envelopes, carrying bricks, hauling rice and coal. Any mistake was punished. Any pause could be your last. I saw the faces of kids younger than me, terrified and lost, and knew that I could only save myself. The system had no place for compassion. Only power. Only obedience. And years passed in a blur of pain. I watched the strong broken, the clever crushed. Some tried to escape. Most never made it. The few who did return broken, their minds shattered by the horrors they had seen. When jung-jae finally closed in 1987, after reports leaked and more than 30 inmates escaped to tell the world, I was still alive. But being alive didn't feel like victory. My soul had been hollowed out. My body bore scars that wouldn't fade. My mind replayed screams I couldn't erase. I tried to rebuild. I tried to find my brother, my family. I found fragments of them, lost in the ruins of what should have been a normal childhood. Friends and neighbors looked at me with fear, as though the hell I survived had contaminated me. Even now, I'm still haunted. Even now, I still struggle with the memories of that place, the people who died, and the cruelty that the world refused to see. But I survived. I tell my story because if we forget, the nightmare continues. If we don't speak, the ghosts of Brothers Home will fade from the history books, while the truth remains buried in silence. We were children. We were innocent. And we were trapped in a hell that no one would acknowledge. I was 10 years old when they took me from my street. One moment, I was helping my mother sell snacks near the bustling market, counting coins carefully and hoping no one would snatch our little cart. I had plans in my head. plans for school, for going home and helping my mother cook dinner, but they ripped everything away. A uniformed police officer grabbed me by the arm, pushing me toward a waiting bus. I screamed, tried to pull away, and begged him to let me go. My mother's hand clutched my sister's as she ran after me, but the officer shoved her back. That bus smelled faintly of diesel and rubber, a strange, suffocating mix that would haunt me for years. I had no idea where it was taking me. They called it a welfare center, a place supposedly meant to protect children like me. But that was a lie. Jung-jae was actually a prison disguised as charity, a nightmare stretching across the years I had no idea I would survive. The moment we arrived, reality hit me like a hammer. My hair was shaved off in one rough sweep. My clothes, the only items that smelled like home, family, and sunlight, were ripped away. In their place, a thin green uniform was handed to me, the same one hundreds of other children were forced to wear. It was itchy, stank of bleach and sweat, and somehow made me feel smaller than I already was, as if my body didn't belong to me anymore. The guards laughed as we huddled together, shivering in the cold. Fear became our first lesson. We were placed into platoons, groups of children organized under slightly older inmates, appointed as leaders. These platoon leaders were given authority to control us, punish us, even torture us, as long as the rules of obedience were upheld. Some of them grew cruel almost immediately, because cruelty became survival. They mimicked the guards, and in doing so, became the first line of oppression we faced every day. Labor was endless. From morning until the evening, we scrubbed floors, carried bricks, worked in fields, or sat at small tables making toothpicks and envelopes. The food we were given was barely enough to survive. Stale barley rice and fish so rotten it made my stomach twist. If anyone tried to hide even a crumb, the punishment was brutal. Beatings, humiliation, solitary confinement. I watched as children screamed, crying as their bodies were forced into submission. Hygiene was almost non-existent. Showers were rare, and disease spread like wildfire. Dorms were overcrowded, 4 children jammed into beds meant for one. I lay awake at night, shivering under thin blankets, listening to the muffled cries of other children, the whispering prayers that rose from beds around me. Some children disappeared without explanation. They were sent to the office and never returned. Sexual abuse was a horror I could not escape. Guards, and sometimes older boys empowered by staff, would touch, threaten, and violate us. Once I was put into a platoon led by an older boy, but it wasn't long before the male staff took an interest in me. They whispered, threatened, and when they grew angry, they forced me into a corner and hurt me. Every night, I prayed I wouldn't be next. I learned to shrink into myself, to keep my eyes lowered, to pretend I did not exist. Every movement, every glance, every whispered word could provoke violence. The punishment room haunted me the most. Hidden behind the director's office, it was a locked chamber where children who misbehaved or questioned orders were sent. Some never returned. Others came back bloodied and silent, their eyes hollow and empty. We called it the room of no return, and the fear it instilled controlled us more effectively than any chain. Even in the darkness, we found moments of connection. My closest friend, Soo-min, and I would huddle together at night, whispering dreams of freedom. We shared scraps of food, stories of our families, memories of sunlight and streets outside. Escape was almost impossible. The fences were 7 meters high, patrolled day and night. The system encouraged betrayal. Children were forced to monitor each other, report whispers of escape. Once, Soo-min and I tried to climb the fence under the cover of night. We measured it, memorized the patrol routes, and whispered our plan like a prayer. But a flashlight beam caught us halfway, and we were dragged back and beaten in front of the whole platoon. When the facility closed in 1987, leaving survivors free, our lives did not immediately improve. Society branded us, labeled us as vagrants or troublemakers. People looked at us with suspicion or fear. My parents were fractured by their own struggles. My mother cried herself to sleep, haunted by the thought that she had failed me. Reuniting with my family was slow and painful, and even then, the trauma could not be erased. I remember the smallest details. The sound of guards' boots echoing in the hallways, the metallic smell of the punishment room, the scraping of hands across the concrete floor. The memory of children lost to the system is a weight I carry every day. Names I cannot forget, faces I cannot erase. Sometimes I wake at night, convinced I hear the guards' shouts, the slam of doors, the screams. The world outside can never understand the world inside, not unless they lived it themselves. Even decades later, I ask myself, how could a place like Brothers Home exist in a society that prided itself on order and growth? How could a man like Park In-gun run an empire built on pain and fear? And yet, I survived.